excuse that we are live. Woohoo! First stream. Let's hope this is actually working as expected. At least on the technical side of things. Because right now I have no idea. I feel like a dum-dum. Thought there was a way to be able to see if oh, okay, here it is. It's live. Is there a way for me to... Alright, I'm live. Awesome. There was a way to be able to see if oh, okay, here it is. It's live. Is there a way for me to... Oh well, okay. I mean, it's going. That's something. Alright, well, I just hope that the quality of the audio, excuse me, of the audio and video is up to par. I have a vertical monitor, so I don't know how that's gonna affect people's ability to actually, in terms of the sizing of the text when I read stuff like this. But yeah, we'll see. Again, first stream, so we'll see how it goes, and at least it's up from here, right? Improvement. That's the idea of this channel anyway. Diminishing skill issue. We want less and less skill issue, including figuring out the technicals of live streaming or posting videos on content platforms like YouTube. I might also be streaming on Twitch, but I just figured I should just start with just one channel and figure out the rest later. So anyway, welcome. As I keep saying, first stream of this brand new channel. Per the name of the channel, diminishing skill issues. The whole point here is really for me to learn in public. If you're like me, you love but also hate the fact that there's so much information. I mean, if you're a software engineer, I guess anything to do with software engineering or just technology, machine learning, whatever. There is so much to learn out there, and I just have so much that I've bookmarked, and I keep telling myself I'll get to it, and yeah, it's a never-ending battle. I have so many tabs open, like on my phone, like it's ridiculous of things that I want to go through, and just get better in general, in terms of craft, in terms of getting better at the craft of software engineering. Anyway, so the point of this channel is for me to have an excuse to actually sit down and go through the material, the stuff that I find interesting. In my mind, what's going to happen, at least for the foreseeable future, what's going to happen is I'm usually gonna find one article like the one that's currently on display right now that I think is interesting, and basically go over it, talk about it. In some cases, actually do some code experiments related to the article. In fact, for this particular one, I'm starting to think because I've glanced at it, I scanned it a while back because this came out all the way back in May. I remember seeing it. So before they released this, there was a thread on Twitter about multi-tenancy and all that. And then this article came out, and I, like so many things, I opened the link. I usually just read the first paragraph, well, not first paragraph, but like the initial stuff just to figure out, you know, if it's something that I truly want to go through. And if it is, I just basically stash it and, you know, with the goal or the intent of coming back to it and actually going through it. But this is one of the articles or things that I opened and never went back to really. And so I figured um, it's, it will be a good, the topic, a good article for a very first stream to go over. So yeah, so for the foreseeable future, I think mostly will be the content for the channel will be mostly, just going through articles like this. I think I'm planning on also, uh, one of my coworkers recommended a machine learning. No, that's not. Is that it? I know it's this. I recognize this guy. I don't know if that's the actual. Ah, yeah. Okay. I think this is the one. Yeah. I'm thinking because I want to go through this. It was recommended by one of my coworkers as a good introduction to just as a software engineer wanting to understand some of the inner workings of just machine learning slash deep learning, at least at a base introductory level. And so I'm thinking that maybe I may also do some streams where I basically go over the material and I guess learn in public or do the course in public basically. Um, so there's that. I also tend to like to read open source code bases. So I'm thinking that maybe I'll also try to do that as a stream to just go over some GitHub code bases. I'm thinking as a first one to at least test that I may try something like open auth. And I mean, it's relatively new. So, and I mean, it's on something that's pretty, common authentication. So it should have, and I mean, it's also in TypeScript. So it should have, I would like to think, some appeal to a lot of people. Obviously, uh, I also am very much aware that people don't necessarily want to sit around and watch somebody else go through some open source code and trying to understand it. But I'll give it a shot. And the goal will be to sometimes uh, make some contributions to the to the code base, depending on how comfortable I feel with uh, my understanding of where things are, and depending also on the ticket, and you know just anyway, that I think that will be something that will be interesting to do, doing some open source contribution while on stream. Anyway, but bring things back to the present. As I said, the goal will be to, at least for this very first stream, to go over this article. It's actually somewhat, I guess I didn't really double check, but it seems to be a little longer than I anticipated, but I think we can go through it. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. All right. Ultimate Guide to Multi-Tenant SaaS data modeling. Excuse me. I want to assume that when we say multi-tenant SaaS, most people watching this maybe already know what that kind of means. I mean, the basic idea here is that when you're building a SaaS, you don't necessarily, in terms of just the infrastructure of things, you don't necessarily want to run separate infrastructure for every single tenant of your product. Like imagine something like Slack. It would be insane for them to have to spin up a whole separate, like complete stack, top to bottom, for every single workspace, I guess, or organization, like completely separate. And I mean, for some very specific clients or organizations, yes, they probably do that, like for security and blah 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 reasons. But for the average, I don't know, pro plan or whatever, I don't imagine that that's the case. Well, I know for a fact that that's not the case. Like that just doesn't make sense. So the idea of multi-tenancy is that you want to run, well, you want to serve requests for many tenants at the same time. So again, let's take the example of Shopify, for example. It would be insane if they had to spin up a whole database, and I think they use MySQL. If they had to spin up a whole database, pause. Give me a second. All right. Uh-oh. Technical difficulties. Like I said, I'm new to this. My camera has decided to not work. Well, it has tracking enabled, so I don't know, maybe that might not be a great idea for streaming. Sorry about that. I thought it was gonna stay in place, but it was doing, basically following me. which is what it was configured to do. But anyway, all right. Sorry about that. I'm back. Um, what were we talking about? Multi-tenancy and the case with Shopify. Yes, it would be insane if Shopify was spinning up a whole separate MySQL database for every single new merchant that signs up. So instead, they would have the same MySQL database that basically hosts multiple merchants. That way, for example, if you want to get the products of, I don't know, merchant XYZ, the same database or the same server will give you the products for that merchant as well as the merchant of, I don't know, the merchant 777, you know. So yeah, so I hope that that gives a very broad idea of what the whole point of multi-tenancy is about. I know recently I read there was that Postgres article that came out from I think it was Figma, Postgres SQL. Yeah, very interesting article um, on how they had to basically move from one single Postgres database to multiple ones. There is some. I don't think that they directly talk about multi-tenancy, but I mean it's one of the. I mean, part of the reason why something like this is challenging is the fact that you have to account for the fact that you have multi-tenancy involved, because this what used to be this user table, this user table, as you can see, had many users that are not necessarily for the same from the same tenant. So when you're sharding, you also need to keep in mind that part of your sharding strategy should take into consideration the fact that there's multi-tenancy involved, because it would really, like, you want to minimize, ideally you want to minimize the level to which users within the same tenant are distributed across many shards. That's just not ideal. Ideally you want to pack as looking at the user's table, the user table here, when you're sharding, it would really suck if, I don't know, maybe it's not a great example, but because the numbers here are so small, right? I mean, yeah, the numbers here are kind of small to illustrate what I'm trying to illustrate. But basically, the idea is that when you're breaking things down, basically sharding your database, multi-tenancy plays a part. Like understanding how multi-tenancy is factored into your database will definitely play a part into how you decide to do horizontal sharding for the database. Anyway, we barely made it past the title, but the whole point of all that rambling was to quickly give some idea of why multi-tenant SaaS is even a thing to think about. Okay, so the TLDR, if you are considering multi-tenant data, which all SaaS builders must indeed, you should build Teams functionality from day one. This guide explains how and why. All right. You should build in Teams functionality on day one if you don't want to regret the past. You will need Teams functionality eventually, unless maybe you're building super basic mobile or desktop app. But what about something that seems simple, like a bookmark manager? You probably still need it. Your users will probably want a family account, a business team account, or simply to share access with an assistant. Yep. Um, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's. I don't think there's a whole lot to add to that. That's just yeah. If you're building a SaaS, like multi-tenancy is like yeah, it's a first-class citizen basically. As a user of the internet, I have too often been frustrated with a piece of software because they didn't add Teams functionality on day one. It's very complex and painful to add later, so I have to wait many months or years for them to finally add it. Humans are relational beings. When creating software, you model the world. If you don't model the concept of human relationships, you create an impedance mismatch. It's quick and easy to add on day one. You can add it later if you have to, using database, explain and contract patterns, but it's always easier to do it now. This was seems to be the most comprehensive guide. No, I don't know about that, but yeah, we'll see. To multi-tenant data modeling. This is based on my 14 years. Oh, okay. 14 years, okay. Building multiple SaaS apps and comparing notes with other SaaS builders. All right. Okay, SaaS, we know what that is. Multi-tenants, multiple users for your app, and you want to keep separate. Yep, basically what we went over. A multi-tenant apartment building contains multiple tenants. All tenants have access to shared common spaces. Each tenant likely has multiple people who are permitted in a private space. Yes. Single user, single database versus database per user. Again, this obviously relates to the examples I was giving earlier, with Slack and Shopify, not spinning up, a whole database for each merchant or for each workspace. I mean, that would be so like, yeah. I mean, I know it you it's easy and rightfully so to make the claim that software can be very wasteful these days in the way resources are used. Um, but this would be a whole different level of wasteful if that was how SaaS was built, like a database per user. I'm not saying that there are not scenarios or use cases where this makes the most sense, but at scale with a product like Slack or Shopify, like this would just be like, yeah, that it's a big fucking no. There are two main ways to achieve data isolation. You can have a single shared database where every table has an organization ID, yeah, and every read and write will include that. Yeah, that's almost, well, that's like the first pinpoint of multi-tenancy. By the way, it's the fact that I mean it comes with the territory, as people say, but it can be quite annoying that every single interaction with database requires like it some tenant identification, like, which is why, again, going back to the point, where is it? You should build Teams functionality from day one, or multi-tenancy from day one. Because if you don't, then you have to retroactively update your queries or your backend code everywhere that interacts with the database to basically include some way of identify which tenant you're making requests for. So, you know, um, so you probably want to do this day one. Like you want to start writing your software with this rather than having to retrofit it to add this kind of, stuff later on. Um, you should default to a single shared database unless you have an exceptional case that demands otherwise. Exactly. Most people use this model. Database per user could be required in some cases. Like if you're doing something, for example, with the government, like, or in a very super, like, highly regulated industry, or a client has very strict isolation requirements, like, then yeah, it makes sense, because they're gonna pay for it. That's basically the premise. Like they want that kind of special treatment, so they probably are paying for it. Just like I'm sure that there are some Slack organizations that, some organizations that use Slack that have a very special setup, just, to prevent any sort of data leak, or, because they have very strong data isolation requirements. So, yeah. I have no experience with the database per user approach, so I can't speak in depth about it. I think I would say the same. Like any sort of software product that I've been a part of has always been with a single database architecture, as from a multi-tenant standpoint. Excuse me. Multi-tenant data modeling. At the most basic level, we need two models: user and top-level tenant. What to name the top-level thing? Choose whatever makes you happy. I think organization is probably the safest bet, because I think, to me, it's the most, like, I want to say generic. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word here. It feels like the less specific option. Because a company is an organization. A team, it's not so far-fetched to think of a team as an organization. A workspace, I feel like, I don't know. Yeah. So, at least in my experience and in my mind, it usually goes user, organization, and within an organization, well, yeah, within an organization, you have projects. So a user can create a project, or an organization can create a project. And inside a project, you can have workspaces. And at that level, you start talking about authorization concerns. So it's the same project but different workspaces, meaning you have different levels of access, functionalities, features that you want to expose, across different workspaces. So you may have one workspace that's just for external partners, like a portal thing. You may have a workspace that's just for internal users. Um, yeah. Uh, Obviously, also, at the project level, you can also have teams. Like, so I think Tenet is a little too bland. Like it's way too generic, I think. But organizations to me seems to be the most fitting to use, in terms of labeling what is a tenant in the system. Uh, okay, so yeah, so basically my take is that go with organization. Uh, oh, okay. What I use and recommend because okay, great minds think alike. All right, all right, all right, all right. Clear and short, but it's not. It isn't common parlance in B2B. Okay. Not ideal. Many associate. Yeah, account with user. Yep. Hey, all right, all right, all right. 40% of people agree with me. I feel so special. I mean, that's not such a wide margin, though, compared to workspace. But again, fundamentally, I think you can fit in the concept of a team and a workspace within an organization. The other way around doesn't work so much, right? Like, you could arguably, like, say that you can have many companies within the same organization, right? Like, that's a thing in the real world where you have this huge corporation, which is the organization, that then has these different companies under it that you know it's managing. So again, I don't know. I just organization just fits the best, I think. So I agree with whatever the author is going with here. Okay, so we'll use organization. So there are three models. GitHub. A person has a single user account that is added or removed from any number of other organizations. Okay. Yes, that is my understanding of how GitHub works. Yeah, okay. Um, all right. I'm trying to think to anticipate the issues with that. Um, I think the issue here is that, and I think I've faced this myself, where you technically want to have more than one account, but you don't want to go through the hassle of just like using separate emails, I guess. And I don't know, just the ability to switch between them seamlessly is not a thing. Um, yeah, that's about the extent of my complaint. Anyway, Google. Each organization requires a separate user account. There's no concept of sharing a user account across organizations. Now, the issue with this is that, um, well, it depends. It doesn't really scale too well. Like if you're part of, for whatever reason, you're part of, I don't know, 12 separate organizations. You need 12 separate user accounts. Now, I don't know if that also means 12 separate emails or you can use I think it does actually. I don't think with the Google model you can use the same email uh, for multiple accounts for multiple organizations. Um, yeah, so that doesn't sound so great either. Okay, linear. For linear, we have a hybrid of the two. A single user account can have access to multiple organizations. So the like Slack, basically, where uh, you log into Slack and you have all your workspaces in that sidebar where you can choose which one you want to you want to interact with, and you don't have to log in like into each workspace separately. Like you log into your account and you have all the workspaces right there, and you're able to just switch between them. That's pretty awesome. Um, a single user can have access, okay, and a person can have multiple linear user accounts, each with different organizations that it can access. And I think that's the main difference between this and the GitHub one. I think with the GitHub one, you have to use a separate email. And I think, if I'm understanding this right, for linear, you can use the same email uh, for and have multiple user accounts with the same email, and use basically have a many-to-many relationship between your accounts and the organizations that you are part of. Also, I think you can, let's say you have accounts A, B, and C. I'm pretty sure that this also, well, I'm not pretty sure, but I would imagine, reasonably speaking, that user account 1 can be, I guess they're going to explain it down, but let me just guess. So with linear, it sounds like what you can do is you have one email. With that one email, you're able to create multiple accounts. Let's say account 1 and account 2. And account 1 can be a part of organization A and B. And account 2 can be a part of organization B and C. So, and even though both account A and account B are part, oh, yeah, are part of, no, what am I saying? Even though wait, I just lost my train of thought. Basically, the idea is that there's no mutual exclusive restriction, I think, which makes this very flexible. So one email, multiple accounts. One account can be linked to multiple organizations, and you can have the same the other way. One organization. Oh, actually, that may be a problem. Actually, I mean, from a security, or I guess from a role switch perspective, it would be great if you can have multiple accounts for the same organization, because you may have one account that is specifically for your root access. I don't know why I'm using this. Root access, and you only use that account, you know, for that organization when you want to go, God mode and make all kinds of admin changes. Uh, or you may choose your other less um, capable account as your default one that you use to log into the organization. So I think that's a fairly reasonable requirement to have, or use case for the ability to have two user accounts for the same organization as a single user. But yeah, we'll see if that's what Linear is actually doing. The clever ones in the room will point out that you can create a new GitHub account for each organization, but that's not the normal path. Okay. User account, personal account, okay, In a GitHub model, a user can have access to multiple organizations from a single user account. Okay. Inviting a user to an organization will always invite an existing user. It will never create a new account. Yeah. The GitHub model is ideal for social-oriented apps where a user has a strong identity, accumulated personal information attached to the account, and public user profiles. This model has significant challenges when it comes to enterprise customers, who want full control over user accounts. I think that sentence is pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to add any more to that. Depending on what enterprise you work with, they don't necessarily want your personal GitHub account to be part of the organization or whatever private repos, for XYZ reasons. Because they can control creation or deletion of that person. However, GitHub Enterprise now has an option to provision new accounts for access to the organization. If you take this into account, GitHub is the same as the linear model. Okay. Most people will be better off with the linear model. Like it's more broad. It gives you more flexibility. As the product grows. Okay, the Google model. Person, multiple accounts. I'm guessing separate user emails as well. Can I access multiple accounts? Okay. Inviting a user to an organization will always create a new one. The Google model is ideal for email providers and enterprise business to business. By the way, I just realized that this whole mic position here might be a problem because I can anticipate. Well, I guess I can just look at the... it's like in the way a little bit. I think I need to be mindful of that. Let's see. Let's try it here. All right. Okay, so in the Google model, a user cannot have access to multiple organizations. I think we read through that. The Google model is ideal for email providers, enterprise business-to-business apps with strict access models where anyone, like consultants, interacting with business, will be given their own business email. Uh, that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. In this case, there is no value in sharing user identity across organizations, and it doesn't make sense for a single email to have access to multiple organizations. However, this breaks down at scale even for enterprises because eventually some users will need access to multiple organizations, like managed service providers, during or after mergers and acquisitions. It's also frustrating for small accounts, and you end up, yeah, this hack here. I mean, it's annoying, but it's also like great because using this pattern where you have the plus and it's something, it's really nice when you're signing up for things online. It's a way almost like, because I hate it when you look at your inbox and you wonder, okay, like, who is sending this to me? Like, when did I give out my email to receive these things? So it can be nice to just peek at the, you know, the I guess the destination email and look at this part and be like, oh, okay, I remember adding this. Like, I remember why, or, subscribing for that particular thing based on that. I guess you can call it signature or suffix. Anyway, but yeah, this is true. Um, Concurrent user sessions is important for a good user experience. Yep, that's the Slack model where you can just sign in. Or I mean, even the Discord model, like you sign in and you have all the workspaces or you know Discord servers that you have access to. Like you don't have to create a user session for every single one that you are logging in to. Uh, Most people, but okay, this is starting to sound like a broken clock over here. Just so you know, this guy already has his mind made up. In case you haven't figured that out. Okay, the linear model. Yep. So same user account. So one person, multiple accounts. Uh, each account can map to multiple organizations, but I don't think that this handles the case that I was talking about, where one user account. No, wait, what was I pitching? I was pitching for multiple user accounts to the same organization. So in this case, that will be both user account A and user account B. Like basically have an arrow from here to here. Okay. From here to here. So you have user account A goes here and user account B goes here. This is me just, I guess, trying to force the issue. But yeah, I really do think that it's not a crazy thing to design for. Like have multiple user accounts for the same person for the same organization. I am well aware of the fact that it will introduce complexity. And if I'm being honest, the only strong reason why uh, I guess the only really good use case that I can think of right now is you know, the permission thing where maybe user like the permissions uh, between that maps user account A to this org is much higher than the mapping from this to this, and so the person can then choose which one they want based on whatever task they're trying to accomplish. But that might be one of those over engineering thing. Uh, anyway, well, let's see what's the linear model. In the linear model, a user can both have separate user accounts for different organizations and have access to multiple organizations from a single account. Yep. The linear model combines the best of GitHub and Google, excuse me, and is ideal for most B2B startups. Enterprises can both strictly control user provisioning, yeah, and access and allow their users to belong to multiple organizations. So, oh yeah, okay. For a moment there, I thought that by users I thought they meant person, but really, this is what they're talking about. This uh, representation of a user. It is the most flexible. Well, even if it was at a person level, it's still basically allowing a person to be part of multiple organizations. So, anyway, it is the most flexible and it provides the best user experience because it reduces the number of logins required. Number of logins required to access all the organizations. Uh-oh. Now we know. Now we know where he really stands. I recommend the linear model. You need to really know what you're doing and why you're doing it before choosing GitHub and Google models. I would say yeah, that's probably good advice to follow. Personal versus business organization accounts. For apps that will likely be used for both personal and business use, you may think of having separate personal and business organization types. For social-oriented apps like GitHub model, this could make sense, and for other models with many single-player users, a personal account enables you to offer a simpler UX by hiding things they don't care about. But there's also an argument for not hiding those and keeping them in UI's upgrade prompts. For Google and linear models, you only need a single organization type. Personal accounts are just organizations with a single user. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that model. I've seen it in quite a few products. I can't think of one specifically right now, but one where, yeah, you want to make a personal account, but it's still under the guise of, an organization. Basically, everything, like, how do I say this? The product only understands a project within a concept of organization. I think it would be like if you have a GitHub account and you couldn't create a repo unless it was like there's no such thing as a personal repo technically. Like it would be repos will always be created on an organization. So like right now Yeah, this is an organization. OpenAuth is an organization. Well, is it actually? Let me just use something that I actually know. So Wasm Cloud, in this case, is an organization, right? And this will be a project, Wasm Cloud. And I, uh, I've worked on Wasm Cloud myself. Uh, Let me see. No. I want the one that my fork. Wasn't cloud. Okay, now let's take this. Yeah. So, what was the point that I was trying to make? Oh. Is this? Yeah. This happens to me sometimes. Where I realize, wait a minute, why am I here? What was I trying to prove? Let me go back. What was I trying to get at? Okay, yeah, and I was giving the example of the fact that in this particular way of doing things, it will be like you wouldn't be able to just create a repo like under your account like this. It will have to be under some sort of organization first. Um, yeah. Anyway, um, this makes it easier for you to implement and eliminates any friction should a personal account want to upgrade to a paid business account. Yeah, but I don't like it. Like, if it would really be annoying. Like, imagine if for you to have a GitHub repository, you need to create an organization and then create that repo for that organization. Like, that would really suck. Like, I like the way you can just create a repo for on your own personal account um, without the need for creating an organization first. Um, Two-sided systems like marketplaces. Yeah. In fact, I'm thinking of something that is a marketplace like, and the linear model just makes so much sense for that. Uh, so yeah, I definitely agree with this. If you have a marketplace like platform where you have two sides, uh, the linear model definitely makes a lot of sense. Um, okay, you will want to support the user to participate in both sides. Yes. So again, you can think. So I mean, if you're thinking in terms of, I don't know, e-commerce, you will have a seller, or I guess a supplier side, and the seller slash retailer side. And at that point, you could then model um, things in such a way that well, okay, let's think about this. Yes, so the merchant, when you sign up, um, same merchants can have two different accounts, right? One for as a supplier, and also as a retailer, right? especially in the marketplace, they may be supplying, let's say, shoes, but they also want to sell stuff that are not shoes. So, as a seller or as a retailer in that marketplace, not only are they able to sell shoes that they supply, not only to themselves but other people in the marketplace, but they can also sell stuff from other suppliers. So, you know, this is basically how that will work in a e-commerce marketplace setting. Like the need for having the same merchant, you know, same merchant or same person. Well, the merchant doesn't have to be a person. You know, it can be a whole company or brand. But same point. You have a merchant. You'll have the supplier account and the retailer account, and maybe there are a supplier in these two networks, and there are a seller in this or retailer in this specific network, right? Like imagine if you have this a cloud platform where you as a merchant can create your account where you're a supplier on a platform like I don't know, Amazon and Walmart, I guess. Um, I don't know. Maybe those are not great examples. Because the idea of being a supplier here is that other people are selling your product on the platform. You're not the one who's actually, like in this particular diagram, the implication would be that you are supplying some products so that people on this platform can sell it. Same thing here. But on this platform, let's say it's Shopify, you're actually selling, uh, you're doing business as a seller, as a retailer, um, to sell other suppliers products. Um, yeah, I hope that was a good enough example to illustrate why you will want a linear model for SaaS, for a marketplace like platform. Another example is an enterprise app with different employer versus employee experiences. Employers are usually also employees of the legal entity. Yeah. Modeling this can be very domain specific and outside the scope of this article. Okay, resource ownership. The resources in your domain will usually belong to one of the three things: the entire system, an organization, or a user. Things that belong to the entire system span across multiple tenants like global data or config. Almost everything else should belong to an organization. Assigning an item to a user is a special case. um, yeah, I think based on everything that's been discussed so far, this makes sense. Yeah, this definitely is something to keep in mind, like assigning resources specifically to a user. Because what happens when that user account gets, you know, I don't know what that was supposed to mean. uh, I guess I should have added the sound effect. Poof. Disappears. Like what happens then? Uh, or just somebody gets fired or whatever. Because we all know permission stuff gets yeah, convolute it pretty fast, and you end up cases where users have way more access than they should, and you know, you are one bad configuration away from basically locking an entire system out of accessing a particular resource because because of bad permissioning. Uh, One user, maybe there was only that user that had access, a particular access to the resource, but now that that user, for whatever reason, has been removed from the system, there's no like there's no way to access the resource except for basically destroying it. Um, yeah. So anyway, the whole point here is that be careful when you're designing your SaaS, like who owns what, basically, and always treat a user account as something that could disappear or become like what happens when a user gets deleted or removed from the system. How does that impact um, other parts of the system in terms of, you know, I guess the hierarchy um, of things. Anyway, let's move on. Associate users with organizations. Yes, definitely. It would be foolish to have a user in the system with no. Well, okay. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You can be a user. Well, okay, no. This is the part where um, making the distinction between a user and a user account probably makes sense. Oh, I mean, not only makes sense, but is important. Um, I think the idea here is that if there is a user account, well, if you're a user in a system, it's because you have a user account, and a user account should, in theory, always be linked to a particular organization. I think that's the point here. Organization can have multiple users. User can belong to multiple organizations. Yes. User should have an access role that can be different for every organization. You can invite users to an organization. Yeah. You can assign items like to-dos to a user, but when you do so, it's always within the scope of that specific organization. You can assign items to a user before they accept an invitation. Oh, okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, that last one is, it depends on what kind of system you're building. In some system, this will be considered a security issue. Again, depending on the system, you don't necessarily want to give out information about anything unless you know for a fact that somebody has been um, onboarded fully into the system. So again, it depends. Memberships. I recommend the following membership model because it will work great for all three access models, even if a user belongs to a single organization like with Google. Membership, okay. User, all right. Let's see some SQL. SQL. Oh, there was a time when I hated having to deal with SQL, but these days, man, I don't know. I think there's something about growing as a developer where you realize SQL is life. Like, it's it's everywhere, and it can do a lot. Like, you just have to be patient enough to learn the intricacies. But even just learning the basics, it's pretty cool, man. Just learn enough SQL to be dangerous. It will serve you well. Um, yeah. Anyway, let's see. Does any of this make sense? Yes. Not no. Default current timestamp. Sure. Foreign key. All right. Okay. So the membership is what you use to define the role, user ID. Excuse me. Uh, I'm trying to figure out why it's okay for this to be not null. Well, yes. This I understand. You don't necessarily need an invitation to define a membership. It's just added metadata. But I think this is fine when you basically want to sever the tie between some user and an organization. Like, I think that would be a quick way to just um, like if you set it to null, right? Like maybe I don't know. I was gonna say maybe instead of deleting rows, you just find all the rows where user ID is equal to you know XYZ, and instead you set it to null, and that's a form of deletion. But I don't know, why would you do that? Yeah, like I'm not saying that this is wrong. I'm just wondering why this is a um, practical and safe bet to not make this not null. Yeah, I can't quite think of one right now. Again, it's one of those things where you probably need to be in the weeds of things. I mean, he did say that he has 14 years of experience building SaaS products, so I suspect that something at some point happened, you know, and he carries some battle scars with him that informs this decision here. Not to make this a not null column. It's one of those things where, you know, when you know, like you've been through some stuff to make such a decision. Oh, it could just be a choice, really, and there's really no strong reason why not to put not null. Again, it's one of those things where you just have to implement the thing and see how it goes. Anyway, but yeah, other than that, everything else checks out. Unique, not null, makes sense. Um, yeah, okay. Associate domain models with organizations. The most important thing in a multi-tenant system is data isolation between tenants. Yeah. Best way to achieve this, organization ID on every table, which is actually missing here, by the way. Oh, well, no, because, okay, again, I don't know. Oh, okay, the membership is what is the user account definition here. So again, um, there's a difference between the user and the user account. So this is the user representing a person, like an actual physical real life person, and the membership here is the user account where uh, it represents a person being part of an organization. So that's something to keep in mind. That's my understanding. We could make it to the end of this and I realize that I'm wrong, but I think that's the gist of it. Like user versus user account. Associate domain models with organizations. Okay, blah blah blah. Scope all database reads and writes. Yes, this. I think we talked about this at the very beginning. This is why it's important to think in terms of multi-tenant concerns on day one, because if you don't, then you have to retroactively update your code base to make this consideration, or to consider this a first-class citizen. The idea that every single operation to the database needs to specify an organization. Like it's not fun having to retrofit this. Yes, even items that might be assigned to a user, like a to-do, should have, organization ID. Yeah. For example, if you have a product, is adding organization I have to remember not to just sometimes read things in my head and then skip to something else. Anyway, and read it out loud. Maybe a little confusing from a viewer perspective. I'll try my best to avoid that. All right. For example, if you have a product model with a child product variant model, theoretically you could create a product variant with an organization ID that is different from the ID of the product. Oof. Yeah, that's some skill issue right there. That would be some skill issue. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. Weirder things have happened in the software world. Unfortunately, there are no perfect solutions to prevent developers from introducing bugs. Yeah. This is where tests and code reviews come into play. In practice, this particular issue is unlikely to occur if you're rigorous about passing organization ID everywhere as recommended below. Still though, some cooked up some cooked up sleepless motherfuckers gonna write some code that's gonna make this possible. Like it's actually, yeah, that's actually a pretty good example of the kind of thing that, yeah, you don't think can happen, but then you realize, oh no, yeah, this is a very very real possibility. Anyway, Loose enforcement. The loose approach is to keep ID as a unique primary key and not organization ID as a separate index foreign key. Let's see. What does that say? Okay. Loose enforcement. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Foreign key. Not null. Excuse me. Yeah, create an index. Sure. Because sometimes you may want to fetch all the products for a given organization. So having an index on organization ID is a good idea. It's annoying that you have to do it for every single table though. Like, okay, maybe not every single one, but quite a bit, quite a few tables. Well, but then again, it's something that can be incremental. Like you can at first not do it, and then if you run into performance issues, you can decide whether adding the index makes sense. Okay. The benefit of this approach is that you can efficiently look up a domain model with just the ID, even when you don't know what organization it belongs to. Yeah. The downside is that you can accidentally forget to scope a query. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Also, if your ID is just an auto increment, like if you've worked on a multi-tenant system before, this might be something that you ran into, where let's say product ID 57, for whatever reason, like you can't just assume that product ID 57 is always gonna be organization 1 product. Like you can't assume just by looking at the ID, you can't assume that product 57 will always come from organization 1, right? And so if you have a query on a public endpoint that exposes an endpoint, or I guess that exposes the ability to fetch, item by ID, you want to make sure that the result you're returning is still scoped within the organization of the client making the request, right? So even though the endpoint says, oh, you only need to pass in the ID, when you're making the request to the backend, you better include the tenant's log to make sure that, as part of the code fetching the item, you include the organization ID as a constraint of the fetch request, and because you can request product 57, but the row that is, for whatever reason, the row that is matched is actually not for the organization ID, for the current session of the client. Oof, you don't want that. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Whenever you're working with a multi-tenant system, just having the primary key, the primary key or the primary ID of a resource is not necessarily enough in terms of data isolation or preventing a data leak when you're returning, information about that resource. Yeah, okay. So the downside is that you could accidentally forget to scope a query with organization ID. To compensate, you should implement an access layer in your code that requires. Yep, exactly. Yep, 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 yep. Uh, in fact, if you're paranoid about this, not only do you include it in the query, uh, but you also check the result, like the row, the record that came back. You double check that the organization ID is the same. Now, that may be, extra and unnecessary, but again, it depends on your level of how much paranoia you have. Anyway, um, strict enforcement. Yes, this will be the quote unquote very smart way to do this, but this is also very annoying. Well, I'm trying to decide if I'd rather work with a system that has this versus this. It depends. Like, if this is a big project and you have a lot of junior people working on it and you want to go on vacation and come back and know that, you know, things are going to be fine, then this is probably the way to go. But then again, you have to make sure that nobody has access to the database in such a way that they can undo this. But this can be quite a pain to work with. But it gets them getting used to. I mean, it's like working with a linter, right? It's like it's annoying because it has to everything has to be a certain way, and that's what it is. But once you get used to it, it's actually pretty nice because there's an expectation of something, how the code is supposed to look in terms of linting rules. So think of this as a linting rule. It's like, yeah, it's gonna be painful at first to work with it, to always have to there's no such thing as just a single uh, value for your primary key or your resource ID. It's always the organization ID and then some instance ID, like always, and that can be annoying. But you know, it is what it is. I mean, that's just the smart way to go, really. Uh, all right, so I'm streaming. Somebody just knocked. Well, by somebody, I mean my wife just knocked uh, on my door, which means that I need to fly through this. I was actually hoping to try and do some quick proof of concept code for this, um, but I don't know if we'll actually get to that. It's not in this particular stream. Maybe as a follow-up stream. We'll see. Let's actually just finish this first. I think we are at a good, uh, maybe a little bit past halfway. Anyway, let's power through it. The benefit of this approach is that you must include organizational need to identify a resource. Okay, so you never forget it. Yeah, it's always there. It's in your face. You have to use it. It's the first in a tuple, so the index will be optimized for selecting all the entities in an organization. Technically, with this, you could have two resources with the same ID in different organizations. Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, and that brings back the whole example with uh, product ID 57. Can be product ID 57 in organization A or product ID 57 in organization B. Um, so yeah, so same ID, but different organizations. Uh, this unlocks the ability to provide your users with the ability. That's an interesting composition here. This unlocks the ability to provide your users with the ability to clone an organization to a sandbox environment for testing or something. Associate domain models with users. Okay, so all models will belong to an organization. Additionally, items in an organization can be assigned to a user. Okay, but here's the kicker: assign the item to the user's membership. Yep, not the user. Yep. Excuse me. This allows you to assign items to a user before a user has accepted the invitation. You'll be familiar with the frustration of a lack of this if you try to assign GitHub issues to a user you just invited. Again, I think this is a case by case thing. Depending on what you're building, this can be a non-issue, like the ability to do stuff with the user account before it's been, I guess, onboarded fully. Again, it depends on what you're building. Beware, however, of the tendency to assign things to a user that simply belong to the organization. Assigning something to a user should be very intentional, like assigning a to-do to a user for them to complete. That to-do will also link to the organization with the organization ID. Include the org ID everywhere, including URLs. Yeah. The organization, and again, the whole point here is that if you're serious about multi-tenancy, the whole data isolations and accounting, making sure that everything is accounted for in terms of knowing what resources belong to what tenant. You just, yeah, this is the level of awareness that you need. Yeah. The organization ID is critical for operations. So you should literally pass it around everywhere, like it's going out of style. Okay, include organization ID in all URLs. Well, I don't know about URLs, if I'm being honest. Like it depends. Because, I mean, supposedly, well, I don't know if supposedly is the right word. You would assume that once you've established a session for a given client, that the metadata that you have for that session would mean that you don't necessarily need to include this in your endpoints, the endpoints that said client is accessing, because it's basically implicit. Well, implicit or explicit? Implicit that kind of metadata is included somehow, some way as part of the request, and it's on the back end that that metadata gets processed or included when making decisions about what data to return. So in this specific case, like having to always have organization ID in your URLs, I don't know. Uh, I don't know. But I get the sentiment. I get the point, right? Yeah. In all query inputs, in all mutations, this definitely, right? This definitely, these, I mean, mutations, yes, definitely. But again, I don't think that, I think it depends. I feel like there's something that you don't necessarily want or have to force the client to provide every single time. And maybe that's what they meant here, right? Like, it's not, like, obviously in the actual code, in the actual backend code, you have to do this. Or you definitely want to do this. Now, the client making the request, let's say a front end application, I don't know that, as you're making your GraphQL mutation query, that you necessarily, like, I don't think that having to include organization ID in every single GraphQL mutation from the front end really makes sense. Plus, it's like, it's the front end. Like, you don't necessarily trust it anyway. So again, I think this is more of a back end session handling thing. Yeah, I guess when, I mean, this is presumably, this will be, let's say, I don't know, some React front end making a request to some URL. Like, I don't know that this is necessary if you've established, or you have a solid way of establishing what, metadata is related to a given client session. Like, this information becomes not really that useful. Um, yeah. But that makes the URLs ugly. Let me explain. When you have access to multiple organizations and you visit a URL, you will need you will need the organization ID and user's role to properly show and hide the URL for that role. Yeah, but again, I guess I'm not necessarily sure if they are saying that you need this to definitely come from the front end, or to have the back end have pre-processing in place to derive this before actually making, you know, the queries to the resources. Um, but again, I mean, it's a choice. Like, I get it. I get it's a level of detail that is useful. I would say that. Um, or I get, it's more explicit about that. I think, let's say that it's more explicit. Um, it's definitely in the face of whoever's the clients of the application. It's like, yeah, no, you need an organization ID. Like, if you show me the organization ID, if you don't have it, you know, sucks for you basically. Like, you're not getting anything without it. So, yeah. Um, okay. Without this in the URL, you have to make a database call to look up the organization for this project before you can show the correct UI. Again, yes and no. Again, it depends on how you have your session, your backend session metadata set up. It's like, you know, every request comes in is from a particular client, and you have some. Okay, maybe in a sessionless environment, um, where you, because I mean, even if you don't have a session like a ready session thing, even with um, an auth token, you could decode the token and get the organization ID from that. Now, then that begs the question, you know, how are you even, you'll start asking questions on how you are handling your off tokens, basically. But really, you can get that information from the off token, um, or just having an in-memory thing where you can quickly fetch. Like basically, the point is, do you? It's not a foregone conclusion that you have to make a database call uh, just to get the organization information before making the actual request. And okay, let's even assume that this is coming from the front end or the client. It's like, do you necessarily trust that entirely? Because somebody can just fudge with the URL, and just because they want to try things out and say, make the same request with the same project ID, but if in the original URL you just said 3, they may change it to 11 just for fun to see what happens. Then what? Like, you know, the front end or client can be, you can't trust the front end or client to give you or to be an authority on which uh, tenant slash organization it belongs to. Like you definitely need a way to uh, handle that in the back end. Um, but yeah, in terms of hassle, making a database call every single time like this is, yeah, not great. Granted, you have to fetch the project and can return the org ID with that, but almost certainly you have some UI on the page that does not depend on the project data, but does depend on the user role. So yes, you can get by with an organization ID in URL, but you have to do a lot more plumbing. Um, yeah, I think this is a prudent thing to prescribe, let's just say. I just wouldn't take it as a blanket statement to religiously follow this idea that you need the organization ID in the URL. Just think through it and see what you come up with. I used to be a URL purist, but now I'm much happier with OrgID and all the URLs. Okay, fair enough. I mean, he did mention that he has 14 years of doing this, so I think it's okay to give him the benefit of the doubt on that. Um, Now the tricky part, user login sessions. Ooh, all right. This is the part of the test where most companies wash out. Oof. There are many complexities, and your first attempt or two will likely be incorrect, or at least have frustrating experience for users. It's probably the simplest with the GitHub model since you have a single user. But as you grow, you need enterprise level features, and GitHub Enterprise Authentication couldn't be further from simple. Oh, really? Actually, never had to use GitHub Enterprise, so I don't know. Super basic implementation. Store organization ID in the user session. Yeah, that's. I guess that's what I was hinting at while discussing the whole URL thing and the client side having to provide all of this. This effectively scopes all interactions to a single org. You can have an org switcher for switching to other orgs. They have membership too. Switching will update the organization ID in the session. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. So if you have a user interface like Slack, yeah, then you need to make sure that um, whenever somebody switches workspaces, that you update the I guess organization ID slash workspace here, workspace ID, so that further requests are within that scope. But then what happens when that fails silently, some way, somehow? Because shit like that happens when there's a silent failure to upgrade the organization ID. That can be a problem. In such a case, the URL scheme thing will help. Because supposedly, the way the UI is built is that when you switch to a given organization, it updates the URL. And assuming that the state of the UI updates accordingly, or is definitely supposed to do so, then it would be very weird if the slash org or the org URL parameter said, I don't know, Postgres, but the UI is showing you a MySQL workspace. Like, yeah. So I guess from that perspective, the URL thing is pretty useful as a fallback for when this, for whatever reason, fails silently. Yeah, okay. But you have a big problem. Let's say I have access to org1 and org2. I'm logged into org1, try to access org2, and then get 404 because I'm not logged in. Yes, terrible experience, yeah. And if you have multiple user accounts with access to separate organizations, you have to log out and log back in to switch, well, which is what we, yeah, that's definitely not what we want for such a, I mean, in terms of great user experience, you don't want that for your multi-tenant system. A user who has to log into multiple things on the same product is that's dog shit, basically. Um, yeah, so storing accessible orgs in a session. This may be synced across all sessions. And if a user access to a certain org is revoked, remove that. Yeah. Now you're talking about consistency issues, which, you know, there's a whole reason why distributed databases are a beast to deal with. Anyway, now I can directly access all the URLs of all the orgs I have access to without having to switch organizations. But now you have another problem. You started with only email and password login. Now you have added sign in with Google. One of the orgs you have access to is enforcing sign in with Google. But you have a conflict because this one user now technically has two ways to log in: email, password, and Google. And for security, they are treated as separate logins. So now you have the same problem as the super basic implementation where you can only be logged in via email, password, or Google, but not both at the same time. Yeah. There's so much. I think this is the, like, thinking through these things. That's both the pain and fun of this whole software engineering craft. Like having to think about these details. It's both really annoying but also really fun. Being able to anticipate this through years of experience and knowing that, okay, well, this is going to be a problem, so let's grab let's account for this upfront. Um, yeah, okay. Ultimate implementation, concurrent user sessions. All right, ultimate. The ultimate user experience to never have to log out to access another organization. All right. Making sure that, okay, and here they're talking about the actual user, not just the user accounts. Once you're logged in as a user, you shouldn't have to have multiple logins for each user account that you want to use, across many organizations. This is how Google and Slack work. Yep, especially Slack. Well, I feel like going with the Slack example is more helpful for this particular discussion. I think the wall might burst into flames if they require logging out to switch accounts. To implement, store two things in a user session. Accessible logs should be synced across all user sessions. Logged in logs on this device cannot be synced across the user sessions. Logged in logs on this device. Okay. An array of logs. I wonder why not just make an array of string now. This is a more. So this, I'm gonna answer my own question. This makes it so that it's more extendable later if you want to add maybe some additional metadata to each, I guess, to each org. Maybe there's something besides the org ID that you want to add to this. So it makes it less of a hassle to refactor this for that particular requirement if it comes down later. But as opposed to if you just have an array of string, it can be quite a hassle to extend that later. Or modify it to have more than just the org ID as a piece of information that you want to log. Okay, the first time a user logs in on a device, set accessible organization to the list of all the org memberships. Excuse me. Okay. Set logged in. Okay, yeah. So this will be a subset of this based on based on some criteria. In this particular example will be the logged in method. Yeah, so you have the full list of options, and then the logged in orgs on this device is a way to, you know what that means, right? Yeah, we understand each other. You get the point. Basically take a subset of the whole, based on some filtering criteria, like login method, for example. The user can log into additional organizations by clicking sign into organization on the org switcher. Add the new org ID to accessible. Wait, yeah, okay. Add the new org if it's not already there, and to logged in orgs on this device. Okay. Why have separate? Okay, that, yeah, because accessible orgs should be synced across sessions. You can change the role or revoke access to a certain org, but this is more specific. Yeah. So again, this is the more broad view of things. This is the more constrained one on a particular device. Well, I'm reading this several months later, so I would like to assume that they actually got around to this. Maybe we'll double check that in a follow-up stream if there is one specifically around this topic of multi-tenancy and a rough implementation of, you know, the things that are mentioned in this article. I'm thinking about it. New user sign up. For brand new user sign up, in addition to creating a user model, you will also create an organization and a membership and link them all together. New user sign up, create organization, create membership. Wait. Oh. It's this part, well, the create organization part that has me a little puzzled. I mean, that's not necessarily required, because you can already have an organization and the user signing up to be part of that organization. Right? Okay, let's just move on. Maybe there'll be more clarification coming down. Okay, so new user sign up, create organization, create membership. User signs up to accept invitation. Verify invitation is valid. Create a user and attach to membership. Blah blah blah. Anyway, so this is basically the state machine, or I guess workflow of sign up involving these entities. Optionally, you can build a feature that all users with a configured domain will automatically be added to an organization. Yeah, I guess this is, what I was kind of hinting at. For example, like the idea that when a user signs up, creating an organization doesn't seem like something that has to happen. For like, yeah. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with this here, unless I'm misunderstanding what they're really trying to convey here. But yeah, that step is a little puzzling to me. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on. I mean, okay, like you can have a user sign up that involves being part of an organization, or it could be that a user not only wants to sign up but also, well, okay, because I'm trying to really map this in my head. So you have the person, when they're signing up, they're definitely creating a user account, but we've also established that a user account must be part of an organization. So depending on how the request is made, yes, the creation of an organization will be necessary. or a want, and their user account can just, you know, as part of the user flow, be automatically be considered to be part of an existing organization. Um, I guess that's more of the invitation flow then. Okay, let's move on. In this case, you will create membership during sign up, attach them to the existing organization. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And I think this is most cases in the SaaS world. User signs up to be part of an organization. Inviting users to an org. To invite a user to an existing organization, we'll use the membership model as the invitation. Yes, because the membership represents the actual user account that is tied to the organization. Okay. Along with its invitation ID, invitation expires at, and invited email. It's listed previously. The membership table SQL is listed previously in this guide. Okay. Yeah, we saw it way up. So yeah, invite user to join org, create membership with unique invitation ID, email user sign up link with invitation ID in it. Okay. Create a new membership, allocate to the organization. Yeah, remember how I was complaining about that? I think this is now providing a reason for it. Like no wanting the user ID to be non-null. Because it's while the invitation is just sitting duck waiting to be activated, you technically don't have a user account yet. See? Okay. Sometimes the answers are not revealed until you are in the details. So yeah, I mean this now makes sense quite a bit, you know. Unless until the invitation has been consumed, you don't actually have a user account. So it will make sense that in this membership table, the user ID is actually nullable. Okay. Send the user an email with a link to the sign up page that has invitation ID 123 in a query parameter, which will be the CUID or random string. When the user submits the sign up form, include that invitation ID in the API call. In the sign up API, if invitation ID is included, you know, I just realized that I never checked. Well, actually, never mind. I was gonna say I never checked this to see if anybody's watching and if I need to be interacting with them. But I just realized that is so. I was making a big assumption here that anybody wants to watch this. Uh, but now I'm looking, and I wish there was a way for me to know. I mean, I'm sure there is. I'm just not used to it. Like, I don't know where to look um, to figure out if there's anybody else watching. And um, yeah, I think that's something I'll have to figure out for the next stream. Uh, Although OBS did suggest some sort of chat thingy, but I closed it. So that was very smart. Anyway, oh well, let's just. If anybody's watching and you've messaged or something, I'm sorry. I I missed it or didn't see it or whatever. It's not because I was trying to ignore you. I just, yeah. First time streaming, so this thing, very definitely trying to figure this stuff out. Um, anyway, yeah, almost done. Okay, so the user submits the form with the invitation ID. If the invitation ID is included and matches a valid membership, then create a user model and attach it to the existing membership. Okay. Revoking access to network. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Again, going back to my original comment or concern about the membership table thing. Yeah, so you can either set it to null or delete the one entirely. Yeah, see? Uh, yeah, so again, this is talking about the whole battle scores thing. Uh, you know. So yeah, so when you see things like that and your spidey sense, you know, warns you, I mean, it's fine for your your spidey sense to warn you, but at the same time, don't be so quick to have knee-jerk reactions about how it has to be completely wrong and all that. I I did say, hey, um, it's probably one of those things that when you start getting down to the details, or you've had experience dealing with, an unwanted complication. It's the kind of stuff that you it's the kind of decision that you make that may not be immediately obvious to others uh, why that's useful. So yeah. Um, so yeah, so like I think this is a fairly reasonable uh, thing to consider for why you want that field to be nullable. Besides the fact that again, until a user has actually accepted an invitation, you don't technically already have. I mean, you don't actually have a user account, so that field should be nullable. So that's reason number one. This will be reason number two, like this, where your whatever process you're using to revoke does not. Maybe it does a soft delete at first by setting the field to null, and then once maybe you then have a cleanup process or post processing job that goes through and does a bunch of things. I mean, that can be also relevant for stuff like, auditing, which this kind of hints at. Uh, Although this mentions it from the perspective of the UI, but I'm talking just, for um, housekeeping purposes. You know, you can set to null, then have a process that does auditing that basically does a bunch of post processing and then remove the role once it's done. Um, anyway, otherwise, you can delete the entire membership model and you'll need to update any other models that were assigned to this membership to be assigned to other membership. Yeah, again, this will be something that a post processing step does. Role-based access control. The membership has a role or roles. I'll probably go with roles. Gives you more room to do things later. You could also just have a separate table called membership role. I was gonna say you can also have a default role besides, uh, you know, an actual separate member role table, but then again, you get into the whole consistency issues where you may update details in the membership role table and then forget to update the actual membership table. Anyway, all of that is to say that, if your membership, if you're sure that in this whatever system you're building, a user account slash membership within an organization only has a concept of a single role, then yeah, you should just have a role field on the membership table. Otherwise, in terms of roles, I mean having multiple roles, maybe having a separate table makes the most sense, like a many to many relationship mapping slash mapping table, and then have an actual role table. So you have membership role, and then you have membership role. Membership role, right? And so for the many to many relationship in the middle, you have the membership role table. Or you can just have a role fields on your membership table and make that some sort of JSON table, or just an array of IDs for role IDs. Yeah, it just depends on what the system the system being built is. But my general advice would be, for this particular decision, I would say go with the option of having the membership table, the role table, and the membership role table. To charge my watch. Okay. Store the role in the user session so you don't have to make database or API calls to get. I mean that goes with the whole having metadata for the organization slash tenant of the as a scoping metadata thing when the client is making a request. I don't know why he didn't bring that up when he was making the case that if you don't include org ID in the URL, then you have to make a call to the database to get that information. I mean, you can just have a session then to get that. And that's what I was pointing out. Anyway, define a list of permissions that each role has. This can be in code or static roles. This can be in code for static roles, which is almost never a good idea. I mean, again, it depends, but I don't know. Hard-coded static roles, they can only take you so far. And yeah, because I feel like in my experience, when you have that, it really leaks into the code, like implementation details. This assumption that you have a static set of roles with, defined static permissions, it just kind of leaks. You start building features with that assumption in mind, and then when later on you have to go with the dynamic roles setup, where you actually have, in some cases, a whole separate externalized service that handles authorization for you, with the role thing, all of that. Once you have to make that switch, then your refactoring is, it can become a pretty big deal to make that change, because so much of the code is written with the assumption that you have these static roles that are, predefined in a code base. So my advice, if you're building a multi-tenant SaaS product, is, unless you have a very good reason to do so, and you think that you won't have to, I guess, worry about it for a very long time, don't go with static roles. Just bite the bullet and assume that you're dealing with dynamic roles right off the bat. Okay, and define one or more permissions that are required to execute each query and mutation. Yeah, that's just good practice. Every action in the system requires some level of permissions. Even the absence of permissions is a permission. And by that I mean literally, I don't mean literally don't provide any permission information. You still have to provide information. It's just that the permissions array is empty, and that is an indication of a level of permission. It's either, and depending on how the system is built, that may mean that if the array of permissions is empty, that may mean that anything is possible or nothing is possible. I would say 99.9% of the time, an empty array of permissions means no. At least that would be my advice. Yeah, because it makes more sense. Like, the absence of permissions means there are no permissions. Like, this client has no permissions to do anything. Yeah. All right. Use a library or build your own abstraction that allows you to check on both client and server whether the current role has a certain permission. Our back will probably be a full blog post. Yeah, I bet. Itself at some point. Yeah, that's like, that's a whole thing. Whole thing. All right. Billing subscriptions belong to the organization. Yes. Well, yeah, I guess from a SaaS perspective, yeah. I was gonna say, well, actually, you may have a business model where even though you have user accounts being part of an organization, the way things are built is still at the user account level because the organization itself is not necessarily responsible for the cost incurred by the user. They just are more of a proxy for aggregation. But the responsibility of paying the bill is actually on the user. Um, but I feel like that's more of a, I think it would be fair to say that that's more of a specialized case of billing. Um, yeah, I think generally speaking, this is the way to go at the organization level. The organization is the place to manage your billing. Typically, you'll have a billing email and a Stripe customer ID on the organization, and it can have many subscriptions. The Stripe subscription ID or the information. Okay. When you charge per user, you simply count the memberships that belong to an organization. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, basically my point. In the example, well, in this model that I gave,